Go. All right. All right, we're ready to get this started, everybody. Please silence your cell phones. Please don't forget to turn in your evaluations. And for anybody out there who was a little hungover from last night's festivities, I'm very sorry. This is a topic I'm very passionate about. I might be a little loud as we go forward here today. So this talk is the game design of Starcraft II as an eSport. And what I'm going to talk about is all of the decisions, challenges, and choices we made to make Starcraft II into this sport that people would go and watch and would hopefully capture the imagination of not only players, but of fans of eSport around the world. Now, for those of you who don't know, eSport is this sort of really weird thing that people are doing where they drive maybe an hour or 2 hours to a venue and sit in a big room like this, and they watch a bunch of gamers on stage play against one another for cash prizes. In many cases, tens of thousands of dollars. There's some tournaments that have hundreds of thousands of dollars in their prize pool. So even the second, third, fifth, eighth place guy is making some kind of money. We've got pro players, people whose jobs is to play video games professionally to watch. This is sort of something that this developed during Quake. This developed by lots of other companies who have been developing and working on esports. The Halo group has a very strong, powerful esports community. This was invented for us by our fans really at the end of Brood War, sometime maybe in 99 or 2000. It really started to take off. And of course, as everybody knows, very popular in Korea, but we're seeing a lot of growth in this in Europe and in North America as well. So I'm also going to explain some questions that I do get asked that I don't always have the best answers for, or questions that sometimes I wish people would ask that I never get asked about Starcraft II. And all of these things are going to come back at the end of the day to eSport. Why do we only have a handful of units in Starcraft compared to our competitors? Why do we have this unbelievably over-the-top comic book storyline to Starcraft II? And why do we still have a Zergling Rush? This is famously the most imbalanced thing ever in video games. Ever. And yet we still have it here in 2011. And of course it all comes back to esports, weirdly. It all circles back to this one value that we have to make this a game that not only do you want to play, but you might want to watch it as well. So I'm going to take you back to a simpler time, back to 2005, when I was a young, bright-eyed senior designer who'd just gotten a job at Blizzard Entertainment working on Starcraft II. And like the team, we were looking around at what was going on in the industry to see what our competitors were doing and what we were up against out there in the business. Dawn of War had just shipped at this time. Great game. It had 4 sides. By my count, 63 plus units, depending how you want to do the accounting, if you want to count the workers or not. But 63 units and 4 sides. And we all knew, and are all big fans of the Warhammer 40,000 fiction, seemed pretty obvious these guys would be adding more races as they went forward. And that turned out to be absolutely true. Supreme Commander was just shipping as I joined Blizzard. It was just about to ship. They had 4 sides and hundreds of units. I stopped counting when I got over like 150. They have tons and tons of units in this game and 4 full sides. And I was told we were going to have 3 sides and 45 units. And I thought, are you kidding me? Are you out of your minds? Why did I come to work at Blizzard? We're going to have a game that is absolutely less content than what our competitors are shipping with today, right? And we're not even out yet. We thought at this point, maybe if we really hoofed it, we could ship in 2008. And you know that didn't happen, right? It took us longer than that. So we're talking games that are 5 years old now have more content than we intended from the beginning, which seemed absolutely insane to me. So I said, hey guys, I've made a few real-time strategy games. Listen to me here on this. This is important. Units equal choices. Choices equals gameplay, and gameplay equals fun. And then they said, yeah, you know what else? Some of the units you're going to have, they're probably going to be the same as the units that were in the original Starcraft. And I said, oh my God, this is the worst thing I've ever heard. I can't believe this is what we're going to do. And they said, hey dude, don't worry about it. It's cool. This is not like other games you've made. This is an eSport. It's something completely different. I said, look, it's new. Not a lot of people are doing this. This is something fairly rare. Sure, the Halo guys are doing it. Quake had a pretty big community for this. Age of Empires had some guys doing this, but we kind of are a driving force in this area for strategy games. We need to support that community, and nobody else is doing it. This is a chance for us to really push the boundaries of what strategy games can actually be in this genre. And they said, this is going to be hard. This is going to be insanely hard. You're going to have to try to invent Basketball II. This is going to be so rough. You're going to need to build on the original. That's not sort of like a optional wishy-washy idea we've got. You're going to need to, or you're going to fail. There's no way you're going to get this done in 3 years, which turned into 5, right? If you're just going to abandon everything that's done before. You're going to need to make Basketball 2, you're going to need to have some hoops and a basketball and some running shoes or some basketball shoes. It's going to have to be some of the things that everybody understands, or you're not going to be able to get this done. So I said, eSport? Really? That weird thing in Korea? We're going to base a whole game around that. A, who cares? And B, how is that any fun? Right? Having not been exposed to nearly enough eSport. Okay. I mean, I didn't really say these things. I'd just been hired at Blizzard and I was scared out of my mind, right? But I thought these things, right? This is what I was in my head. So, who cares? Well, it turns out a lot of people care. Quite a lot of people. This community is really huge, and I don't know how big. Nobody knows. I went to our esports guys and I said, I got to have a number for this talk, how big? And they're like, I don't know, there's a lot of guys, right? We've got, eSport promoters around the world who will say they've got millions of fans, right? Maybe not, but it's a lot of people. And when you go to these venues and you see crowds like this is an actual crowd, right? There's a lot of people that will come to these and they're very, very passionate about this form of entertainment, which of course is exactly the kinds of fans we're looking for at Blizzard. Now I'm going to show you a video, and this video is an absolute disaster, right? I pulled this off the internet. This is a shot from the crowd from a very famous eSport event. This is Boxer in his matchup versus Fruit Dealer at BlizzCon in 2010, all right? But I want you to listen to this. Listen to these fans in the crowd.
Coming up to the front on the ledge, future approach being dropped. Boxer does not have enough to defend the Boxer's out, and his Bane Blades annihilating the range.
I don't know. It sounds like they're having a good time to me. It sounds like that's pretty fun. You can't see what's going on that screen, but they can, and they're having a great time. So there's a lot of them, and they're having a great time. They're really enjoying themselves. This is entertainment. So I guess we're doing this thing. We're going to make this crazy eSport, right? I'm in now. I want to do it. Like, I have no idea if this is going to be successful for us or not. Nobody knows here in 2005 if this is going to work out for us. Even now in 2010, it's a question. How valuable is this for us? But I was excited. It's fun to watch, and there's a lot of people who want to do it. So let's build this crazy thing. So for an eSport, the things that are important for us, the most important value, of course, that it is watchable. It's something that you can sit down and watch to have a good time. It's something you will drive 2 hours to a venue to watch other people do. It's got to be playable, of course. All games need to be playable. It's got to be something that's fun to sit down and play, but this is a little different. We've got to do both at the same time, and that has a lot of exciting challenges for us. So the most important thing, well, not the most important thing, but one of the many important things is that it's got to be clear. I've got to be able to look at the screen and see what's going on. I have to be able to understand it. It's got to be simple. I've got to be able to understand. I can see what I'm seeing, but I've got to know what it means. I've got to be able to hold the game in my head and sort of keep track of everything. It's got to be a game of skill. And this is the weird one for me coming from other types of game development, especially in strategy games. In many of the strategy games I'd worked on before, we were not trying to separate the have and have-nots. We were trying to bring them together. We were trying to scrub out some of the skill because we fundamentally wanted to make sure that when you logged on, you didn't get rolled by some, terrifying Korean who knows how to play the game better than you, right? We didn't want that to happen. We were afraid that would cost a customer from us. You might not come back to us or you'd quit. So we didn't want games that had a ton of skill, a little bit of course, but we want to try to get it down, but not for a sport. A sport's got to have tons of skill. The best need to be the best by far. Or why would you travel 2 hours to watch them if I could just watch my little brother play and it's almost as cool? And there needs to be uncertainty, and a lot of it, right? You want to not know what's coming next. You want to not be able to predict what's going to happen in the next 5 minutes or the next 10 minutes or the next 30 seconds. You want to sit down and then immediately be on your edge of your seat. And if you compare this to sports, there's a lot of similarities in this. right? Football is very clear, right? They wear very distinctive jerseys so you can see which side is which and you understand what's happening with these two teams. It's pretty simple. Now you can argue that the rule book for football is actually really thick. It totally is. But you don't need to know all those rules to watch football. I don't know all those rules, and I can watch football. And I can sit my wife down and I can explain a couple of basic rules, and she's watching. And then she'll have to learn the rest as she goes on. It's definitely a game of skill, right? The NFL, college football, these guys are the best of the best. And there's a ton of uncertainty. How many times have you seen that last 2 minutes of a football game switch by 2 or 3 touchdowns, right? Never mind the potential for interceptions, for sacks, right? All of these things create a huge amount of uncertainty. You almost never want to look away because you might see the game won right now. And so you've got to pay attention. And that's what makes it exciting and really fun to watch. So I'm going to talk about some of these values. And we'll go through them and we'll show you how we tried to achieve these things in StarCraft. I don't know if we always did, but these were the values. This is what we were trying to accomplish. So clarity is why the artists hate me. Or maybe why they hate eSports, right? This is the biggest challenge in many ways for our art staff. This is the Ultralisk. 300 tons of rage, muscle, and hate. Look at that little tiny zealot down there, right next to his right foot there, just cowering, just ready to stand and die like a mighty Protoss warrior. Huge, awesome, terrifying Zerg monster. This is the Ultralisk in game. That's not as cool. That's not even close to as cool. This is the God of War Ultralisk. I don't know what that's supposed to be, right? That's really tiny. So, we can fix this really easily, right? Like I'll go into the editor. I did this in 30 seconds. I'll scale up the Ultralisk. Look at him. That's 150% larger, bigger Ultralisk. Look at the barracks. There we go. Now we're talking. Ultralisk, bigger than the barracks. Look at that little Marine. He's about to get just smushed by that giant Ultralisk. That's what it should be. But it's all a trick. I've hidden 20 Zerglings behind that Ultralisk. 20. This is unwatchable. The players who are playing in this game would have no idea what they're fighting. As viewers, you would have no way to know what you're seeing. The battle could suddenly just be over and you wouldn't even know why. You'd have no idea what's going on because you've managed to hide so many things behind that Ultralisk. So the units need to be big as we dare because we want it to be cool. But they also need to be as small as we can get them so that you can actually see what's going on. I know there's probably guys in the audience who are thinking, why don't you do like a unit occlusion system where you can kind of see through the units like other games have done. And we certainly experimented with that stuff, but it made it very noisy and very hard to understand as well. It didn't actually give you eSports level clarity. It gave you some additional clarity, but not enough. The ultimate solution for us was to fight the size as much as we could to try to make it as crisp and clean as possible. This also hits our effects. Our artists are capable of making way cooler special effects than we let them make. Here's an example of 3 drones being anti-graved by 3 Phoenix, being picked up into the air. I think you can probably see, even from the back rows, which 3 units have been picked up. This is Psystorm. This is probably our spammiest effect in the game. This is a lightning storm made by a Protoss wizard called the High Templar. This is actually right in the middle of the animation, so it's even more clear than this. This is a lightning storm. Lightning. It could go all over the screen. In any game I'd worked on before, it would go all over the screen because that would be cool, right? But in this case, it needs to be exactly the size and shape of the area effect it's going to do. And it needs to be really, really tight and really clean. So you, as a user, and maybe more importantly, you as an observer, can immediately see what's been hit, who's taken damage, what's going on. Was that a good size storm? Did he hit a lot of guys? Or did he kind of miss? Did he kind of screw it up and he didn't hit very many at all? Talk a little bit about simplicity and try to give you some examples of the kind of challenges we face trying to make this game simple. This is why the designers hate me and why the designers hate eSports. This minimum number of units rule. This is a very challenging rule. Now, we don't know for sure exactly what the minimum number of units needs to be in every game. For StarCraft, we feel like it's 12 to 15 per race. Your game could be completely different depending on the combat models you have, the types of tools you have to play with. But for us, through experience, this is what it's turned into. And this is for a number of reasons. Too many units causes confusion for the viewer. He can't keep track. If you think back to football, how many different types of players are there? Well, there's really one. There's a human, right? But even then, there's a few different types. There's wide receivers and quarterbacks and this kind of thing. But even then, a very small number of things to keep track of. When you see those game pieces moving around in a football game, you have a pretty good idea what they're all capable of. And too many units means the pros are guessing. Starcraft, and this is unique to us, or not unique, but it's special to us in many strategy games. Starcraft is a game about scouting. It's about trying to figure out what your opponent can do. You have the ability to hide some of your cards so they can't see what you're doing if you're very clever. If there's too many possibilities, if there were 50 units on the Terrans, the pros would have no idea what to do next. And part of the fun of Starcraft is not only building the right counters to what your opponent is doing, but guessing what he's going to do next and building the appropriate counter before you've seen any proof of it and catching him completely flat-footed when he sneaks in with his Dark Templar and you've got an Overseer waiting for him, right? When you've got the perfect counter in place. And this is a little bit of a cheat because this is not necessarily eSports. This is more of a StarCraft value. But for us, we didn't want any two units to be the same. We wanted every unit to be special and unique and valuable. And this also feeds into sort of good just gameplay and good game design, period. If there's two heavy infantry units on the Terrans, players are going to pick the one that's good, and they're going to ignore the other one. And we don't actually have more units at that point. We just have more confusion. But this is really more of a design value than specifically an eSports value. So we need to have tons of choices. I mean, that's great. I can stand up here all day and say we're going to have 12 to 14 units per race or whatever. But we still got to have tons of choices. You know, Dawn of War is still real. They're still out there. They're still competing with their 63 plus units. And so somehow we've got to try to create as much content as they have got with this very limited rule set that we've created for ourselves by this decision to be an esport. So we started on this process by focusing on movers and shooters, and this is more of a process kind of approach. We wanted to try to figure out how much gameplay could we really squeeze out of units based just on the way they move and fight. No special abilities, no crazy powers, trying to keep things really simple. Stats, of course, is our biggest ally in this, right? We can do things with speed, with range, with rate of fire, with toughness that really separates these units out, really makes them special and unique. We have, very powerful gameplay you can create just by the simple fact that the Marauder is so much tougher than the Terran Marine. It means the Marauders want to be up front. They want to find ways to block. They want to find ways to protect the Marine brothers. And that's just done straight up by being very aggressive with the stats and trying to create very extreme differences between all of these units. AoE shape and size was a tool we tried to use, and frankly, I wish we'd use a little bit more. This is a way that we can try to create a lot of gameplay. The Hellion, this sort of flame-throwing Jeep here, has a lot of gameplay because it's got a straight line attack damage. And speaking of stats on this one, we actually worked, I think, for about a week and a half trying to make sure that the rate of fire on this unit was just right. It needed to be just long enough that it would sometimes make sense to move the unit between shots so that you have that ability to make that decision. How can I fire and then move and get the perfect shot? How can I fire right down his line, right across his bow, getting a totally powerful flanking hit? And that was a ton of effort to get that AoE to work correctly. And how they move is something, again, I wish we'd use this a little more, but we do use it some. The Colossus is a great example of this. This is this big Protoss tripod, or it's actually not a tripod anymore, it's got 4 legs, but it crawls up and down cliffs. And the fact it can move up and down cliffs means this is a unit that can escape enemy fire up a cliff. It can walk over its own units to sort of avoid enemy attackers. And it can also be a raider. This can be the scariest raider you've ever seen, crawling up into your base, blasting all your workers to pieces. I'm going to give you an example of another way we tried to create gameplay, even though we're trying to remain simple. This is the Baneling. This is a small, explosive Zerg unit, rolls into battle, detonates itself on its enemies, killing itself, splashing acid and toxin and goo all over the place. Now, in our game, Banelings counter Marines, right? Marines are these basic Terran foot soldiers. They tend to cluster up nicely for the Banelings when they explode and spread their acid everywhere. This is absolutely the way this plays. Now, really skilled players can spread their Marines out a little bit, but the Banelings are absolutely a really tough counter in this situation. Well, I mean, unless the Marines get stemmed, right? And this is an upgrade that's in the game, and it's positioned on purpose in a place so the relationship changes. Right? So it's not just upgrades I've done in other games. You know, in Command & Conquer Generals, we had a flame tank, and you could buy an upgrade for it that made it a better flame tank, right? Which is cool, but it doesn't change any of the relationships in the game. Now with Stim, the Marines, they take this drug, it does a little damage to them, but they can move more quickly and they can fire more quickly. Now they can kill the Banelings before they close, and more importantly, they can back up and shoot, and back up and shoot, and the Banelings don't catch them. So now the relationship's gone completely different, unless, if the Banelings get their upgrade. right, and they're on creep, suddenly it kind of goes the other way again, and the Marines are in a lot of trouble. So we've got two upgrades, right, that are very simple upgrades. They're basically speed upgrades, which honestly, coming to work on Starcraft, I thought were the dumbest upgrades ever. How is speed fun? Well, this is how speed is fun. It creates these relationships between the units. So now we have more gameplay, but still something very simple to understand when you're playing, and maybe more importantly, simple to understand when you're watching it. I'll give you another example of upgrades and how we tried to use it. This is a special ability upgrade, a little different. We have the regular Roach. This is a tough Zerg unit, attacks only ground, kind of slow, spits acid, sort of melts its opponents. Very simple, just attack, move across the map with these. Anybody can use them this way, really easy. Well, we also have a burrow upgrade for the Zerg. All of the Zerg can learn to hide underground. Well, now I've got an ambush Roach. I've got a Roach that can be used as an ambusher. He's not just a regular attacker anymore. He can kind of sneak up on the enemy, try to lure them across his position and pop up. And since the Roach is kind of slow, and maybe more importantly, his range isn't that high, this is good for him. He wants to be able to do this. And I can buy an upgrade for the Roach that lets him move while burrowed. It's pretty simple to understand, but now he's a raider. I can sneak into your base. I can kill all your stuff, wreck all your buildings while you're out not paying attention. This is one unit, three uses now. Still the same Roach. I think it's still pretty easy to understand. I hope it is. But it's got a lot more gameplay just because we're being very strategic with his numbers and with his upgrades. I'm going to talk about the really crazy one. I'm going to talk about skill. This is why the noobs hate me. Oh, the poor noobs. They hate me so much. Sorry, noobs. So, micromanagement is a dirty word to a lot of players in real-time strategy games. And I don't know. I'm going to guess here. But I think this comes from a time when real-time strategy games were coming from turn-based games. And turn-based gamers felt like, well, I'm going to put up with your real-time because this is the new cool way to play strategy games. But we all know that it's not an action game. We all know that it's still just a very fast turn-based game, right? But that's not really our view of real-time strategy games at Blizzard. Micromanagement is important to us. This is part of the fun of the game. We embrace micromanagement. We want you to be able to make decisions about how to move your units in the middle of the fight. This allows for skill. And people will say it's just about clicking really fast. It's about clicking really fast while doing 17 other things and getting in your opponent's head and know how he's going to click really fast and where he wants to click. And it's really fun to watch, right? So this hits us on a number of important elements. It's fun to watch. It gives us a lot of drama, and it allows for skill, which is so vital to us to be an eSport. And here's another weird one. It allows for degrees of success, right? It's important not that I can either hit 0 or 100, but they can hit anywhere in between. If you think about football again, I could make that first down barely, or I could miss it barely. And that's hugely dramatic to watch, and it's very important to players for their player skill. So now I'm going to show you a video of micromanagement in action here. The red Protoss versus the blue Protoss here. The red Protoss is blinking his units out of battle. Can you imagine how much work this is for this guy to keep these units out of combat? The blue player is getting rolled by this micromanagement. Now imagine that these players are also, while they're doing that, they're trying to bounce back to their base and build more units. And they're trying to keep the whole game in their head at the same time. This allows for a huge amount of player skill and is ridiculously fun to watch. I'll give you another example of how we're trying to create player skill in StarCraft. This is Force Field. This is an example of using special abilities to really try to create some more gameplay. And it helps us hopefully on simple as well. So the Force Field blocks enemy movement, and it pushes units out that happen to be underneath it. That's that little silver octagon there, or I guess it's a little hexagon really, right in front of those Zerglings. And this is the simplest way to use Force Field. You can use it to block the ramp up into your base, right? You can use this to defend your base. Even the noobs can probably do this once in a while. This is the simplest way to do it. But you can also use it on the battlefield to protect your army. And you can try to protect your forces. In this case, this Protoss player is trying to hold off an attack on his force against all these Zerglings. And you can see he's actually missed it a little bit. One of those force fields is not correctly placed, and some units are going to get in. Degrees of skill is in play here in this screenshot. If he'd placed that force field better, he'd have a better chance of surviving this attack. Maybe the hardest way to use force field is to cut an enemy force in half in the middle of a fight. You can see that blue Zerg player there is about to be cut down. Half his force is fighting, half his force is cut off. Those Roaches in behind are going to have a lot of trouble getting and helping their allies and their buddies. But again, you see degrees of skill. He's missing a force field. Sort of towards the top there, some roaches are sneaking around. This is still probably really great placement, but if you blocked a little bit more, it would be even better. So this gets us a couple of things. It gets us skill for our players, but this one also gets us simplicity. This is one ability, right? One ability, but it's also 3 different uses. And when you see it used, you'll immediately understand what's going on. We also talked a great deal, as many of our competitors were doing at the time, about trying to add more fundamental terrain and flanking mechanics to the game. So maybe we should have done something like this, right? We talked about it a lot. Hi, I'm on the flank, +5 damage, right? It just sort of pops up. I'm like, oh, the flank. Oh no, I've been hit. Or maybe I'm on the high ground, +2 armor, right? And we looked at these a lot and we yelled at each other and screamed and fought about it quite a bit. But ultimately we decided the problem with this was it prevented a lot of player skill. So in this example, we've got Zerglings attacking Marines head on. They went straight at them, head to head, and the Marines were large enough that they'd come out victorious. And those of you who played StarCraft know that that handful of 6 or 7 Marines is more than enough to wreck your stuff, right? They can come into your base and kill everything you've got. Here's an example of StarCraft flanking. These Zerglings can attack from different directions. It's the same number of units. Stim is used at about the same time. Because those Zerglings are coming from different directions, they're able to surround. And because they're able to surround very quickly, they're able to take down that Marine force and again, go on to be what will probably be a horribly destructive Zerg victory inside that Terran base. This gives us degrees of success. Depending on how you hit those angles, depending on how you close the distance, it's a real skill. It's challenging to do. It's fun to watch. And all of this gives us that advantage of something you want to come see. Here's another example of how terrain is used. Those of you in StarCraft are painfully familiar with some of this, I'm sure. Here's some Marines in the open fighting bravely and foolishly against some Protoss zealots using their side blades to cut them down to a man. It's too bad. But if they'd used terrain, it would have been a lot better off. Now they're using the choke point to their advantage. And you can see the zealots in the back are unable to close with the Marines in the front. This is not an accident. This is not a mistake in the pathing. Some engineer did not screw up here and prevent those zealots from closing. This is very deliberate. We're trying to make sure that the terrain is meaningful. We worked for weeks on the sizes of these units so we can make sure that the terrain will matter when they come to engage and battle with one another. And you can imagine again here, degrees of success. I showed you an extreme example would be relevant. If those Marines had been able to put one flank against a wall, that'd be better than nothing. This is optimal, to be surrounded by walls at all sides, but one wall would have been something. If they could put their back to a wall, that might be meaningful in the battle. They're not going to win that way, but they might lose by less, which might make a difference in the game and might allow a skilled player to show some real skill. Plus, it's exciting to watch. Will he block successfully, or will he miss it by a tiny bit? Uncertainty is also one of these values we really need to embrace. This is why everyone hates me, and why everyone gets a little bitter about eSports from time to time. The Zerg Rush. How can we still have this in the game? More than 10 years later, you can still get 7 pooled on BattleNet. Why is this important to us for eSports? It's for uncertainty. We want to know that when you sit down, you don't know what's going to happen next. It's not 10 minutes till it gets good. It's very quickly decisions could be made by players. The game could end right here with these 5 Marines charging across the battlefield to destroy their opponent. Or it could be this game. It could end here with fleets of battlecruisers and platoons of men going to their death, being cut down and then rebuilt to go to their deaths again. This creates the total uncertainty. Anytime you sit down to watch, you don't know what you're going to see, what kind of game is this going to be. And it also means from the first few moments of the game, anything is possible. It has a bonus for us as well in terms of gameplay. I've made games that have tried to crush the rush, and all it really does at the end of the day is delay when the game gets interesting, right? At some point, there's going to be a rush. At some point, I'm going to make a move that maybe you're not ready for. That's the point. That's what strategy games are about. So by delaying the rush, all you're really doing, at least from our perspective, is delaying when the fun really begins. And you're also just encouraging it to be a teching game. You lose that choice. Is it a rush game or a tech game? And that's where a lot of players can show their skill, and us as observers can be really excited about what will happen next. All right. Those are the big values. And now is where it gets really weird. Now we're going off of the deep end into the rest of the game. Clearly, eSport is going to have an effect on our multiplayer experience. That seems obvious. But it turns out it has ripple effects throughout the entire rest of the game. Our story is affected by eSports. I did this with the Ultralisk. I'll do it quickly again. There's the mothership. That is the ID4 destroyer of White Houses and command centers everywhere, right? This thing is coming to kill you. And there's the mothership. It's not as cool. It's not the same. The Thor thing fires shells the size of Volkswagens. There's Thor, right? And you know why this is. It's because of eSports, because we need to keep things small so everything's readable. We push them as big as we dare, but we got to keep them very clean. So we do crazy, crazy things. We spend all this money and all this art for our armory so you can see these vehicles. You can see them all. You can see the 50-ton siege tank as big on the screen as we can get it. So that when you're seeing that little tiny siege tank in the game, in your mind, you're imagining 50 tons of destruction at your command. Ultimately, you're playing that fantasy in your head. Because in reality, we're showing you a very small game piece in the world. Our units are ants. Marines are tiny little guys. And this is done because we want to be a big army game. WARCRAFT III had bigger units, but for Starcraft, we want to be a big army game. So our units are these tiny little guys, these little babies. And they die like flies, right? I don't want you to cry every time a Marine dies. You just weep the whole time, right? It wouldn't be fun at all. But I do want you to care about some of these guys. I want you to care about Tychus. Even if you hate him, I want you to care. I want you to have some emotional connection to him. But in the game, he's going to be this little tiny thing. He's going to be this tiny little ant. So we go nuts with this stuff. We make these insanely over-the-top comic book characters. Tychus is not just a Marine. He's a Marine, right? He's this tough guy who drinks and smokes and wants to shoot and kill people. He's ridiculous. He's insane. But when he's an ant, you'll remember him, right? You'll have some connection to him. If you hate him, great. That's cool too. If you love him, that's awesome. But you'll understand who that ant is and why maybe you care a little bit more whether he lives or whether he dies. Our solo tech was this kind of weird problem that we ended up creating. We created all this technology, and by technology I mean like the units and structures and upgrades we have, in the game because of eSports. So we had all these ideas while developing Starcraft II that we thought were pretty cool. We had units like the Diamondback, which is this tank that can move and shoot at the same time. Well, it turned out it stepped a lot on the Marauder. It stepped even a little bit on the Siege tank in terms of its role. These units were too similar. And it wasn't actually that easy to control. It was actually very difficult to manage what this thing was shooting at while you're moving it. This guy wasn't for eSports. He wasn't ready. He's cool, but he's not ready for eSports. We had a Spectre. It's a new type of ghost. This guy's going to be cool. Oh, okay, well now we got two ghosts. You're going to pick one. You're not going to use the other one. And we didn't really want to cut the ghost. It seemed kind of core to what StarCraft was all about. So not for eSports, the poor Spectre. We had a unit, the Goliath, from the original game. Actually still a pretty cool unit. We thought we could do better with the Thor. On this one, I'm not sure we actually did. But we thought we could do better, and so we said we're going to try something else, not for eSports this time around. Wraith, really cool unit from StarCraft. This is a cloaked tactical fighter. We thought cloaking would be a lot more interesting on something that could affect ground in a more significant way. So you could actually raid with the unit, giving it more depth. Wraith, not for eSport, right? We got the Hercules. This one was pretty fun. This was a giant transport that could carry a stupid number of Terran units into battle, right? But the downside of this guy was he wasn't as cool as the Medevac, and it was very difficult to know what was in him, to the point where it was a little too confusing for eSport. And my personal favorite, the Cybercat, which is this unit the artist made for us, that's really cool. It's a fun add to the Terran race. We could not figure out how this would work in the game, or it wasn't a Marine, a Marauder, a Reaper, any number of other units we already had in the game that we thought were cooler. Not for eSport. But these are all cool. These are all units that in any other game I've ever worked on, I absolutely would have put in. But since those other games weren't designed to be an eSport, they made no sense for StarCraft. But we wanted them in the game. We felt like we've done the art. They're fun units to play with. Why should the consumer not have the opportunity to play with these? And so we tried to find places we could put these, right? We created these huge crazy screens where you could customize your army and hopefully do all this cool stuff. And then we had designers working on other things to add to these as well to fill out these systems. We had, our research screen where you could explore different aspects of Terran technology. All because we wanted to have more content for our fans, but eSport requires us to only be, at the end of the day, a very certain, very specific size. It gets even weirder when you get to missions. How in the world could missions be affected by eSport? So we did a ton of crazy mission mechanics in Starcraft II. But there's some challenges in mission creation. I'm going to show you right here the sort of 8th grade version of what, maybe the 5th grade version, of what a story arc should look like. So you've got your exposition, your complications, your climax, and finally your resolution. I know this is really simple, but it'll work for us for today. And eSport mostly works this way in StarCraft. You've got scouting, you've got some early battles, there's probably one big, really important battle, and then GG score screen, and the announcers talk about it afterwards. Probably the resolution is a little bit tighter than it would be, a little shorter than it would be in a traditional book or in a movie. But it mostly works. It mostly feels good, it feels natural, it feels correct, it's fun. Now the solo drama wants to work in the same way. We want to have this same kind of dramatic experience for our players. There's a briefing, there's things that were not in the briefing, right? Unforeseen threats that appear on the battlefield, a new angle of attack for the enemy, a unit you didn't know about before. There's a desperate battle finally, and there's finally a mop-up. This is what it wants to be. And for the most part, this does work with WARCRAFT 3 and WARCRAFT 3 game mechanics. Not to say the WARCRAFT 3 team did not spend a ton of time making missions. They totally did. But WARCRAFT 3 had something called upkeep, which was this tax on your units. The more units you had, the more upkeep you spent. So you were encouraged at a certain point to get out of your seat and go make an attack on the enemy. WARCRAFT 3 had small armies. If you lost your entire army, you could replace that in what felt like a fairly reasonable amount of time. Replacing your army in StarCraft could be a 20-minute affair. All of these things pushes the player to attack. The small armies allows him to attack, to take some chances. The upkeep system pushes him to move out and to engage. This is not entirely true with StarCraft as it's built as an eSport. Players do not want to die. They do not want to sit through 20 minutes of rebuilding their army. So they're going to defend, and they're going to defend well. And they're only going to fight when they know absolutely that they can win. They have just sucked all the drama out of their own experience because that's what we've given them. So this is what we want, and this is what we're going to get if we don't do a ton of crazy mission mechanics. The player's going to get his briefing, cool. The enemy attacks, he's scared, right? He starts holding on. He's not going to move out. The siege tanks are up, the bunkers are up, the SCVs are behind repairing everything, and now he's going to get ahead. Very slowly, he's going to get ahead. And then, when he's clearly ahead, he's going to go out and mop up, probably for a long time, because he hasn't done anything yet. For those of you who remember Dune 2 back in the way, this is how Dune 2 played, right? This is what this gameplay was like. The first enemy attacks were the scariest, and it was all downhill from there. This is not a fun, dramatic experience. This is not what we're going for. So we've got to create some mechanics that really try to give us what we're looking for. So I'll give you an example. We didn't always hit these mechanics by a long shot, but some we did. Outbreak is probably one of my favorite missions in the game. This is our homage to I Am Legend. This is the mission where you are holding out at night against swarms of infested Terrans who are blasting into your base. During the daytime, all the infested Terrans hide from the burning rays of the sun, and you need to go out and burn out their nests as fast as possible. This has a pretty good arc. You get your briefing, but then at night, it's terror. They're coming for you. They're breaking open new ways into your base. They're trying new creatures to break into your base. And during day, it's payback. I gotta go out there and kill as many of those nests as I possibly can because I know nighttime is coming and they're going to get me. So even though you have different phases, the action is always kind of rising as you go forward. Now, it gets a little awkward here. It's not quite perfect. After 3 to 4 nights, the player has survived. He probably starts to get ahead. He's probably ahead of the curve. He's killed enough nests, right? He's surviving long enough, and then the mop-up begins. The mop-up again is probably longer than you would want it to be for optimal sort of story structure. But it works pretty well, and it's certainly a heck of a lot better than the other example where it goes up and then just sort of meanders down for a half an hour. So let's talk about just really briefly about the impact of all of these things on us. Multiplayer was hugely impacted by esports. We took just a ton of damage in trying to make this game in multiplayer. It was a huge amount of effort, right? We weren't completely screwing around for 5 or 6 years. This was a ton of work for us. The art team got hit really hard by the decision to make this an esport. Even the missions and the story were affected by the fact that we decided this was going to be an esport. And there are tons of features that went into this game that I haven't had a chance to talk to you about yet. There's things like replay systems. There's things like observation modes, leagues and ladders, better score screens, anything we can do to make this a more watchable experience, which is vital to being an esport. Our replays are as small as we can get them so that you can email them to a buddy if you want to, so that you can share these things easily with anybody all over the world, so you can share your experience of watching a match or see a very famous match. I guess, was it worth it at the end of the day? I've sort of said all these scary things about esports. I think it totally was. This stuff is cool. This is a way for players to experience games in ways they never had before. This is a way for us to come together as a community of gamers in ways we've never had before. And when you watch these things, it is loads of fun. If I've moved you at all, I highly suggest you go out and check out gomtv.net or go to Major League Gaming or go to YouTube. They're all over the place. Check out one of these matches and see if you agree. See if you feel like, yeah, this is pretty fun to watch. This is pretty exciting stuff. So that's my talk for today. I do have actually a decent amount of time for questions because I was so excited I was talking too fast. As you guys want to line up with the mics, go ahead and start doing that. I want to take a moment to give a shameless plug for Blizzard. We are absolutely hiring on the Starcraft II team. We need people to help us continue this quest to make the most awesome esport possible. We need server engineers. We need user interface designers and user interface artists. And if you're one of those magical people that is both together, oh my God, we've got to find you. We also are hiring all across Blizzard. We are trying to build the best entertainment products we know how to build. We would love to have your talent join us in our quest to try to make these really awesome products. Thank you. Sir.
Yeah, actually I have 2 questions, if it's all right. First,
Cheating.
How do you... I know I'm cheating.
Go for it.
First, how do you go about encouraging a player to use units that may be underused? For example, in the beginning of StarCraft II, the Reaper was used for Reaper Rush, and now it's evolved to like scouting unit.
The Reaper was, I think, a bit of a misstep for us. The Reaper was a unit that we believed could work, and as the player base showed us what it was capable of, we were sort of forced to nerf it into obscurity. He's not in a happy place right now. I think we'll probably address it in Heart of the Swarm in that case. Other units will keep trying to walk the line, but we felt like sort of from a basic design philosophy, the Reaper was a little too early to have the kind of authority that he brought to the battlefield. So you're going to see a couple Reapers once in a while. And you know, you never know. The community has surprised us before. I'm starting to see motherships in Protoss versus Zerg games, which is blowing me away. I'd given up on the mothership 12 months ago, right? I was never going to see it in a pro game. Rarely will I see it even in a live game. But you never know. But I think the Reaper's probably not going to hit that kind of status. We were sort of forced to nerf it.
Second question is, how do you go about increasing the longevity of a game? Brood War was around for like 10 years, and for fighting games, it feels a little stale sometimes when you go from right now Super Street Fighter 4 to now Marvel.
Sure.
You know? So how do you go about increasing the longevity of a game?
We pray a lot. What we try to do is create the best game that we know how, with a lot of variability and a lot of options, and we try to make sure that a lot of the units that are in the game, even if they don't have an obvious use right now, still have fundamental value. And the metagame might change, and those units might roll in, and that creates the kind of variability gameplay that puts how the game is played in the hands of the community, and they're the ones that keep it moving forward.
Okay.
We also cheat a little bit. We have our whole custom game section of the game where we ship a map editor. We encourage our fans to make their own maps, upload them to the service, and share it with the community. We've seen tower defenses, Dota games, all in many ways invented by our community in the past, and great ways to play on our service. So we try to do it through a really tight eSport, and then we try to do it through our custom game experience.
Thanks.
Yes, sir.
How's it going? So you talked about the sizing of units. With the in the beta, I know the Thor size was changed. Like,
yes.
Is there a reason why that was changed so late in the
we were trying. We were trying to make it as big and as awesome as we could. This is a tension. It's not make all units small. They'd all be Zerglings. The Thor would be a Zergling. So we're walking a line in terms of size. So there were two factors on that. One was it needed to be a little smaller. I kind of wish it was still smaller for eSport. But it also had just stupid pathing problems, right? And it was very frustrating to use. And we ultimately felt like we had to try to address that as well.
And then also about the mothership, the metagame is always changing.
Yep.
But did you guys see in the development process, like, whether the mothership would actually be useful, or do you think it will become
Yes, I saw
useful?
clearly that it would not. Right? In my head, that was a unit that we were giving to players who were at the mid to low level so they could feel mighty and powerful. We are trying to be an eSport, but we do allow ourselves a tiny bit of room to just appeal to a wider audience, right? To an audience that's a little less enthusiastic about competitive play. And so we thought, okay, we can have that unit for that, and we'll leave it there. And so I was absolutely convinced that unit would never get used. And maybe it still won't get used much. Who knows? I'm still just blown away it got used at all, which was just mind-boggling to me.
Thanks.
Yes, sir.
Hi. So with the expansions coming forward, you must have a huge challenge with putting in new content and new units while still, right. Can you talk a little bit about the design philosophy you're using in terms of like keeping things clean?
That's too scary. We're going to have to maintain these values, clearly.
Right.
What we're going to do, we haven't decided 100% yet. Are we going to, I honestly don't know the answer to that question. We're still working on it. These values are real, right? I do not want to be giving this talk next year and going, yeah, but we kind of chickened out on Heart of the Swarm and we let it go. We're very committed to these. But at the same time, we do have to bring more value to the consumers. So they say, well, there's enough in this game for me to buy it, right? So I don't know the answer to that question. Ask me in 6 months, and I might have a better one.
Thanks.
Yes, sir.
So in traditional sports, it's pretty common to have a rule progression. So in football, for example, in college football, you only need 1 foot in bounds to catch a ball. You need 2 feet in the pros. In college baseball, you can use aluminum bat. Pros, you use wooden bats. In the interest of keeping the skill cap high for those who are really talented at StarCraft, but still letting new players have success, have you guys considered any kind of, perhaps in Grandmaster League or at the top of the ladder or in the GSL circuit, having some amount of rule separation or rule adjustment to give those guys harder things to do?
Those adjustments actually exist. So we introduced a practice league in StarCraft II to allow new users to, they're basically all anti-rush maps. There's rocks blocking every avenue of approach to your base, giving you plenty of time to protect yourself. We also introduced our challenge maps, which was, I don't know if it was successful or not, but it was a tool we were trying to use for players who actually wanted to get better to learn some of the basics. Like we have a challenge map that teaches you how to block a rush, right? And it's not the perfect rush block, but then again, if you're in the bronze division, you're not probably getting perfectly rushed, right? So hopefully that would move those players back some of those hurdles. When it comes to, GOM TV or a lot of the GSL or the pro games, they're starting to make their own maps, which is absolutely good and right and just. They were using our maps for a long time, which was flattering and cool, I guess. But they're building maps that are designed for players who are very, very skilled. Maps with 16 expansions, 16 locations you could put a new base. Even at my skill level, at mid-diamond to low diamond, really. If I play on a map with 16 places for a new base, the game is not won by strategy. It's won by hiding bases. Because I'm not effective enough at scouting out enemy bases. The pros do not have this problem. The pros are great at scouting bases. So they're starting to make maps for their skill level, which is awesome, right? For us, we still want a tension between rush and macro game, and we still want maps that are manageable for lower skill players. So, our map pool will still be a little bit of a mix between all these types of things. But we are seeing this separation, and I think it's totally correct. I don't think we want to get it to the point where Marines have 60 more health in a bronze league. I think that would be way too confusing for everybody to remember and understand all that stuff. And so we'd like to try to keep it the same game as much as possible. And hopefully some of these other areas will allow for that separation that you're talking about, allowing the skills to really feel right at their different skill levels.
Thanks a lot. And on that note, the latest season of GSL has been really, really awesome as a result.
Hasn't it? Absolutely. Yes, sir.
Hi, I come mostly from like a fighting game background. I only
Cool.
started watching Starcraft when I found like Husky and HD, who are
Nice.
awesome guys, and
Nice.
everyone should watch them. I was just wondering, do you guys ever like cross-pollinate with like say Capcom or something about how to get like big events or how to manage lobby systems, stuff like that?
We have not. We have looked extensively at Halo and other games that do similar types of systems. To them, we haven't gotten together to share notes. It's a great idea, though. We should totally do that. Yes, sir.
Hi. You already answered most of my question about maps, but I was going to ask about if there's a tension, you think, between keeping ladder varied and providing a practice platform for top players who are wanting to enter tournaments to play on maps that are going to be the tournament standard, if you know what I mean.
Ultimately, ladder play and tournament play are going to have to be separated as time goes by. We can't really escape that. And in reality, the types of skills necessary, I think, to win on ladder are a little different from tournament play. Never mind the pressure of the crowd and the lights, which is huge, right? If you've never done it, it's incredibly frightening. I've played in a handful of tournaments in the office and I'm still sweating from it, right? And these guys are in front of big crowds for tens of thousands of dollars. But also, in tournament play, you often know your opposition. You've probably scouted his play styles and strategies. It's much more of a mind game going on there than just playing some random guy who you may not even know who he is. These guys at the top end are often using Smurf accounts. They're not playing with their real names. You have no idea who they are. So ultimately we see ladder play as AAA ball at best, even at the Master League, right? We don't see like Master League equals GSL. It's not, right? Those guys are above even the Master League. And you may there may be some cross-pollination, but at the end of the day, it's such different skill sets, it doesn't seem practical.
Thanks. I'm going to bring that to the forums.
Thanks. Yes, sir.
So in sports like football, a quarterback will go in Monday morning, analyze the tapes from last night, or they'll analyze strategies from, an entire team across the season. And so replays in StarCraft are great. And you mentioned that replays need to be small so that you can transfer them. But as somebody who likes to visualize and analyze player behavior across a lot of players, it's actually difficult to use replays because they're they're encrypted, and we have to build programs to decrypt them to get at the data. And they're also input streams. They're not action streams. So they're just inputs from clicks and stuff.
Yep.
And they're inaccurate unless if you play them in StarCraft.
Right.
So it's actually hard to analyze a large body of replays for like a player. So I just wanted to know if there's any plans in the future to actually build analyzer programs so that contestants can actually study other players' strategies across time.
Wow, the pros would just crucify me if I said yes to that, wouldn't they? Our pro community, for those of you who don't know, is very concerned about replays, period. Because they feel like it exposes them and their play styles way too much. Our general feeling on that is that pros in regular sports are exposed all the time as well, including their practice sessions are sometimes taped, and we want these games to be available. I don't know what our plans are for that. We're going to maintain an input stream, as you say, kind of approach is what lets us keep everything small.
Right.
But I don't know what our plans are for long-term analysis or the ability to batch process replays. It's a really cool idea. I can definitely take that back to the engineers and see what their thoughts are.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Hey, due to the huge difference in skill level between the GSL league and the very basic bronze level gameplay,
totally.
You're getting I imagine you're getting an incredible amount of feedback, not only from in-house testing, but from everybody out in the community. So my question is, how do you reconcile strategies that can be, I guess, are really effective in the Bronze League, and how do you do balance changes for the Bronze League, and then how do you do balance changes for the really high leagues? Is there a kind of way that you err towards the eSports side?
Yeah, we tend to err towards the eSports side. We tend to err towards the higher end players. But the magic win, of course, is a fix or solution that will make as many people as possible happy. There's definitely going to be scenarios where we don't hit that, where the bronze player gets hosed down by a change. There's an ability, maybe it was easier for him to use and now it's a little bit harder, right, for him to use. But the goal is always to try to get solutions that will affect everybody, which is why the balance designers on Starcraft II are, hideously overworked, right? Because they've got to try to find those numbers that will work across all leagues, all ladders, all divisions. And that's the win. But when you put a gun to my head and say, you've got to make a decision, it's never going to work. It's going to hurt bronze a little bit, but it'll help Diamond a little bit. We tend to go with Diamond.
Thanks.
Yes, sir.
Hi. In Call of Duty and other online shooters, they have the prestige system where you can basically just reset your account if you feel like you want to try the lower skill levels again.
Sure.
Is there any plan for a system where you can just like reset your entire account, go back to 0 wins, 0 losses, no placement or anything?
We've talked about it extensively. Just because there's been an urge to do that, I think we'll probably introduce a system. We didn't feel like it was hugely important. We felt like it was mostly a vanity issue, which I guess is why you're probably coming at from. Because if you start to get better, we'll start to rank you appropriately. If you get worse, we'll rank you appropriately again. So we didn't see a lot of need for it, but we know there's a need out there for it, and something we're going to be exploring in the next couple of months. We're also going to be exploring unranked play. I've been out of Starcraft for 3 weeks now, getting ready for this talk and doing other things. I'm scared. I don't want to go back. I'm going to lose 10 in a row for sure, right? So we're going to explore unranked play and other options to sort of loosen up some of those rules that you're talking about.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Hi. Before StarCraft II, I had never exposed myself to eSports, and I got to say I'm hooked now.
Sweet.
My question is there any chance we could have a StarCraft tournament at next year's GDC?
Oh, that would be awesome. Yeah.
And preferably hosted by Day 9.
I will definitely ask. That's a great idea.
Thank you.
Yes.
Hi. I wanted to ask how you're making expansions and you want to add something new to the game, of course, and you were saying adding value to the consumer.
Yep. How
do you add even one unit to a team without breaking everything?
I don't know. Seriously. Well, we're going to break stuff, no matter what, right? Like, if we're going to change anything in this game, it's going to change how this game is played, which, as much as I've fallen in love with the metagame currently in Wings of Liberty, I'm scared for it, because we go to Heart of the Swarm, things are going to change, right? There's no way to get away from that. But how to manage the complexity issues, the simplicity issues, right? These are the ones that really terrify at the end of the day, that I don't know the answers to yet. That, again, ask me in 6 months, and hopefully we'll have a better answer for you.
All right. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right. This is probably something we're all curious about, and please don't say Idra as your answer.
Go ahead.
Of all the active players between StarCraft Brood War, StarCraft II, can you tell me your favorite players on both, and what's your favorite race?
Well, I'm not allowed to have a favorite race, as I'm sure you imagine. I need to remain as balanced as I can. I have to play random, which sucks, because I'm lousy at the end game now, right? I can't keep. If you ask me to write it down on a piece of paper, you know, what should you build in the end game as Protoss versus Zerg, I can do that. And then when I'm in a live game 30 minutes in, I see a mix of units coming at me, I can't remember what it was supposed to be because I played Terran in the last match and I'm playing Zerg in the next. So I play random, and I don't really have a favorite race. Maybe 4 or 5 years from now I'll be able to pick one and go with it. In terms of favorite players, I tend to really enjoy players that have really great micro. I don't know if that's universally. I think a lot of players enjoy macro, but my personal preference, the little one was one of my favorites from beta. I really do enjoy watching Marine King play. But at the end of the day, all of these guys are so amazing. I have been frequently surprised by matches where I didn't know any of the players yet, and they just do awesome, awesome stuff. Because at the end, it's about the drama. It's about these two people who I don't even know throwing down with one another, trying to get into each other's heads, seeing which one will win. I also like players who win with the race that everyone says sucks. That's the other secret.
Do you have a Brood War favorite player?
I don't have a Brood War favorite player.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so I know you guys also have been pushing World of Warcraft arenas as an esport, and I wonder if you can tell me how well you think that fits into the bullet points you had, because it seems like it isn't clear or simple, or even with the dynamics
these are our values for esports. The World of Warcraft guys have special challenges because they did not build it as an esport first. They built it as an MMO first, and I think it works pretty well as an MMO. And then they're trying to make these kinds of values work for them. I think it has certain strengths that work very well. I think it has other weaknesses that you're right, I don't think quite fit these values. Yes, sir.
First up, I just wanted to thank you for releasing the game right in the middle of our fall crunch time. Produce some...
we are there for you.
Yeah, some tight sleep StarCraft budgeting. But so one of the big things that I noticed in the game when I was playing in the first few months of beta was the spacing of the units compared to Brood War. In Brood War, the units are a lot clunkier. One thing that produced was more spread out armies.
Yep.
So imagine, for example, a maxed out Protoss army, just to get it out there. That would take 3 screens maybe with all the Dragoons, whereas in StarCraft 2, you could have that whole army in a little ball. Just wondering what you guys thought about that.
Well, we can't make the pathing suck just because it wasn't that great in 1998, right? So we had the opportunity to improve the pathing, and we did. And everything moves cleanly, it's tight, it's focused, it feels really good. There's consequences, and we deal with those in the balance. That's what we have to do. All right, I'm out of time, guys, but thank you very much for coming today.